Hello everyone. Today we are going to study about the history of Israel from its formation in 1948 to the Oslo Accords in 1993. Now these two are very important dates in the history of the Arab-Israel conflict. 1948 we very well understand that was the year when State of Israel was formed. And 1993, 94, 1993 was the year when the Oslo Accords were signed, and 1994 was the year when the Palestinians got self-rule to some degree with the establishment of Palestinian Authority. But what happened between these years? That is what we are gonna see in today's video. Now, in 1948, State of Israel was formed. This region was earlier a British mandate, and after the British decided to withdraw from this region, the matter was referred to the United Nations, and the United Nations had proposed a two-state solution. Now, we have been listening about this two-state solution a lot these days. What is this two-state solution? The entire area of Palestinian mandate that was controlled by the British earlier, that was to be divided into two regions, one the Jewish dominated and the other Arab dominated, and the state of Israel would be formed in the Jewish dominated area, and the state of Palestine would have been formed in the Arab dominated area. Now, what the Jews did in 1948 was that they declared the formation of State of Israel. They proclaimed the formation of State of Israel in May 1948. However, what is more important here? Like, what is the root cause of conflict that's going on? In 1948, Arabs did not proclaim the formation of the State of Palestine. They did not proclaim the formation of State of Palestine because they did not want to form a state in about 50% of the area. They wanted to form the State of Palestine in the entire region of the Palestine that was earlier part of the British mandate. So they did not agree to proclaim the State of Palestine, and their Arab neighbors, Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Iraq, now all these countries, they also did not agree to form the State of Palestine. Nonetheless, State of Israel was proclaimed, and whenever, like in such a situation, you are going to do a partition of the land, of course there are going to be many people who are going to find themselves on the wrong side of the line. Now let's say this is the UN partition plan 1947. So in this UN partition plan, the bluish area was given to Israel, and the orangish area, yellowish area, it was given to Palestine. Now, some Palestinians obviously would be living in the bluish area, and some Jews obviously would be living in the this yellowish area. That is to say, they would be living on the wrong side of the line. So they would be required to move to the right side of the line. And this exercise by its very nature is very problematic because you are supposed to leave your ancestral lands and you are forced to move into a new territory as a refugee. So this, obviously in 1948, Palestinian population was much more than the Jewish population. And when the State of Israel was proclaimed, the Palestinian Arab population was forced to move out of this blue territory and migrate to either the Palestinian territory or to the neighboring countries. Now, this incident is referred to as Nakba by the Palestinian Arabs. Nakba, literally it means catastrophe. Why it is a catastrophe? Because you are forced to leave your ancestral homelands and you are forced to be a refugee in your own country or in the neighboring countries. Now, because of the tragedy associated with this whole process and the very opposition to the idea of formation of State of Israel, the neighboring Arab countries, they declared war on the newly formed State of Israel, which brings us to our first topic, the 1848 war. Now, in this war, the neighboring countries, Egypt, Syria, Jordan, Lebanon, and Iraq, they declared war on the State of Israel. Objective of the war: we don't recognize the State of Israel, so we are gonna obliterate this State of Israel and declare the State of Palestine in the whole region. But to the surprise of everyone, Israel was able to defend itself. Not only it was able to defend itself, now it felt insecure and it occupied even more territories than were granted to it under the UN partition plan. To understand what's going on here, Israel was attacked by, the new state of Israel was attacked by the Arab neighboring nations with the objective of proclaiming the state of Palestine in the whole region. But the state of Israel was able to defend itself, and then it took even more territories than were granted to it under the UN plan, like I said earlier. So have a close look at these two images. Now this is the UN partition plan and this is the actual position after the war, and you clearly need to pay attention to this purple area over here. Under the UN partition plan, this area was yellowish. It was given to the Palestinian state under the UN partition plan. But after the war in 1949, this purple area, it was taken over by Israel. So it occupied even more territory than was granted to it by the United Nations. And it said that we will occupy this territory because it is required for our security. Had the state of Palestine been proclaimed here in the area that was allotted to Arabs, we would have been fine with that. But because we were attacked for the security reasons, we are going to occupy some more territory. So that was the position in 1949. Now the next round of next crisis came in the year 1956. Now this year is associated with two very important crises in world history. One is the Hungarian crisis. Now that was related to Cold War politics, Soviet Union. And the second crisis was the one that we'll discuss, that is the Suez Canal crisis. Now what was Suez Canal crisis? Now over here is Suez Canal. This is Egypt. This is the Sinai Peninsula of Egypt. This is the Mediterranean Sea and this is the Red Sea, Gulf of Suez. Now over here is the Suez Canal. The state of Egypt, which was opposed to the formation of state of Israel, it had decided to nationalize the Suez Canal Company. Now this Suez Canal Company, the company that operated Suez Canal, which was an important international waterway, which is an important international waterway. Now this was an Anglo-French company. It was owned by the British and the French interests. When Egypt decided to nationalize this company, this was not liked by Britain and France. Now they hatched a conspiracy with state of Israel to take Suez Canal back. What was this conspiracy? They asked Israel, because like Israel was opposed to all the Arab nations and all the Arab nations were opposed to Egypt and Israel, all the Arab nations were opposed to Israel, and the leader of those Arab nations was Egypt. So they convinced Britain and France, they convinced Israel to attack Egypt. They convinced Israel to attack Egypt. Now once Israel will attack Egypt, the plan was that Britain and France, they will also move in with the excuse that they want to protect Suez Canal. Suez Canal is very important for international trade. So we don't want this conflict between Israel and Egypt to have an effect on international trade. So we are moving in only to protect Suez Canal. We don't have any colonial ambitions here. We don't want to occupy any territory. We are moving in only to ensure the security of Suez Canal. So that was the excuse that they took. The plan went well, as they had planned. Militarily, the plan went well for them. Despite militarily achieving their objectives, Israel attacked Egypt. Israel occupied this region of Egypt that is known as Sinai Peninsula, and Britain and France actually occupied the Suez Canal region. So militarily, the plan went well. But what went wrong? Politically, the plan was a disaster. It was a disaster. Why it was a disaster? Because now this was not the old colonial world where Britain and France could do whatever they liked. This was a new world. This was the world that was dominated by two big superpowers, USA and USSR. Now, when this whole thing happened, and it was the period of Cold War, when this whole thing happened, both USA and USSR criticized Britain and France. USSR was very vocal in its opposition. It said that it is simply an extension of colonialism. What Britain and France are doing in Suez Canal region, it is simply an extension of colonialism. And USA also did not agree with the approach taken by Britain and France. So both these, like one of the rarest instances in the Cold War era, both the superpowers, they cooperated and collaborated with each other in United Nations to force Britain, France and Israel to withdraw. They said that you are going to withdraw, we are not going to tolerate this blatant expansion that you are doing. So you are going to withdraw your forces from the Suez Canal region as well as from the other regions, from the Sinai Peninsula. So they were embarrassed and they were forced to do that. So that is how the crisis was solved. So that was 1956 Suez Canal crisis. Now, of course, like the activities were going on within the Palestinian region to create a state of Palestine. But Egypt was not in formation of was not in favor of formation of state of Palestine. So in order to militarily oppose the formation of state of Israel and to form the state of Palestine in the entire Palestinian region, a militant organization was formed, that is Palestinian Liberation Organization, PLO, in 1964, and the president of this organization was Yasser Arafat. Now this organization, it engaged in militant activities, terrorist activities to terrorize the state of Israel and help it form the state of Palestine. Now in this context, the next conflict that came, it was 1967 Six Days War. Now in 1967, Arab countries, again collectively, you have Egypt, Syria and Jordan. Now these three were the important Arab countries that were planning to attack state of Israel so that state of Palestine could be formed in its place. Now Israel had very strong intelligence. What's the name of the Israeli intelligence agency? Mossad. Now Israel exactly knew what these Arab countries were planning to do. Israel knew on what dates they were going to launch the plan. Before these countries could attack Israel, Israel in June 1967, it launched preemptive strikes against these three countries, Syria, Jordan and Egypt. Now again, despite the fact that these Arab countries had much larger forces, these were taken by surprise and Israel was able to defeat all these three countries together. Now what happened in its aftermath is more important. The war went on for only 6 days, hence the name 6 Days War. But what happened after the war, that's more important. Now you see this map and you see this map. This is the map of the Palestinian region from 1949 to 1967. The white portion that you see on this map, this is Israel. The green portion that you see here, this is the Arab dominated region. But what about, like, how was it administered? It is important to know that these two separate territories, this territory is known as the West Bank and this territory is known as the Gaza Strip. Now West Bank from 1949 to 1967, West Bank was taken over by Jordan. Now state of Jordan lies immediately to the eastern border of West Bank. So this West Bank region was taken over by state of Jordan. Now Jordan was an Arab state and this state of Jordan occupied West Bank in 1948-49, the war. Similarly, this territory, Gaza, was taken over by Egypt. Now, the area immediately on the border of Gaza Strip is Egypt. So, state of Egypt occupied this Gaza Strip while Jordan occupied West Bank. That was the state of affairs before the 1967 war. Now, after this war, lot of territories were further taken over by Israel. Now, if we have a look at this map, the entire Sinai Peninsula that we discussed earlier. Now, this was part of Egypt. This entire Sinai Peninsula was taken over by Israel. So, it defeated Egypt and took Sinai Peninsula. It defeated Jordan and it took West Bank. It defeated Syria and it took the area known as Golan Heights. So all the three Arab countries were defeated and territories were taken from all the three Arab countries. Sinai Peninsula from Egypt, West Bank from Jordan, and Golan Heights from Syria. Not only that, this, like the three things that we have discussed, this was the international implication. There would be another important change that you can see in these two maps. The green area has shrunk as compared to this image. This image has shrunk green area. Why? Because Israel occupied this area. This was the area that was given to Palestinian Arabs under the UN partition plan, but after the 1967 war, this area was occupied by the Israelis. And Israel constructed Israeli settlements on these areas. Now, this term settlements, this is also quite a prominent term that you might be listening in the context of the Israel war. Now, this white area in the West Bank was occupied by Israel. And Palestinian Arabs, they were constricted only to the pockets, enclaves that are shaded in green here, in Gaza as well as in West Bank. Now, Israel said that we are occupying this territory. Again, the same excuse was given that they gave in 1948. We are occupying this territory because we fear for our security. Every now and then you declare war on us, and you have so many, we have got so many terrorist attacks that we are facing from this region. So for the sake of security, the excuse that they gave, for the sake of security, we are occupying this region within the West Bank. This region will act as a buffer zone. This region will act as a buffer zone. If you'll want to attack us, first of all, you will need to attack this occupied region. Only then you will be able to attack us. So it's a kind of security measure for us. Obviously, there was a lot of hue and cry against this, that Israel is blatantly occupying the area which is inhabited by Palestinian Arabs, and Palestinian Arabs are being restricted to small and even smaller regions. That's not fair. But Israel was adamant that it's going to occupy this region. So that is as far as the 1967 war is concerned. Now, moving on to the next conflict, that was the Yom Kippur War of 1973. Of course, Arab countries were offended at what Israel did in 1967. So in 1973, on the holiest day of the Jewish calendar, that day is known as Yom Kippur, Syria and Egypt collectively, they decided to attack Israel. Syria and Egypt, they jointly attacked Israel. And the war that resulted in that war is known as Yom Kippur War of 1973. Now, in this war also, Israel was able to defend itself. It was attacked, it was taken by surprise, but Israel was able to defend itself. Now, why and how it was able to do that? Israel said, remember 1967, we had established certain settlements in the border regions. it was only because of those settlements that we had. It was only because of the territory that we had occupied in 1967 war that we were able to defend itself. Even when the countries decided to launch an attack on us, we were amply warned and we were able to defend ourselves. So we are going to continue with this occupation of West Bank. That is the logic that they gave. So that is how Yom Kippur War ended. The war also had a lot of international implications. The Arab countries, like as far as the war was concerned, it was Syria and Egypt. But as far as the moral support and diplomatic support and like other political support was concerned, the entire Arab world, it stood with the Arab countries. All the oil producing nations in the Gulf region, they reduced the production of oil. They stopped the sale of oil to Western countries. It was an attempt to put economic pressure on USA, Britain, that was diplomatically supporting Israel in this war. So it resulted in Middle Eastern oil crisis in 1973. It is similar to the oil crisis that we are seeing currently, but I won't go into that part because let me just go through the history before we come to the present. So in 1973, Arab countries were defeated. In order to put pressure on Britain and France and America, who were supporting Israel, diplomatically supporting Israel, the Middle Eastern countries, they imposed a oil embargo. They reduced the production, they increased the oil prices. Next, a very important thing happened in 1979. That was Camp David Accords. Camp David was a place in United States where discussions took place between Egyptian President Anwar Sadat and the Israeli Prime Minister Begin. The talks were, of course, because the talks took place in United States, the talks were mediated by the United States. Here we can see US President Jimmy Carter. So Jimmy Carter, Anwar Sadat and Prime Minister Begin. It was the first, what is the significance of these talks? It was for the first time that any Arab nation or any Arab representative recognized State of Israel. From 1948 all the way till 1979, none of the Arab countries, none of the Arab representatives even recognized State of Israel. And here also in 1979, it was just one country and one leader who recognized State of Israel. Others boycotted Egypt. Why you did that? You are going against our policy. It's our policy that we will not recognize State of Israel, will not have any talks with Israel, will not have any negotiations with Israel, because we don't recognize Israel. We don't want State of Israel to exist on the map of the world. But when Anwar Sadat did that, of course, US compulsions, diplomatic pressure, economic pressure, sanctions, you know how international diplomacy works. So Anwar Sadat, he was compelled because of the internal and international circumstances to cut a deal with Israel. And that deal, Camp David Accord, that was brokered by United Nations. US president at that point of time was Jimmy Carter. So that was 1979 Egypt-Israel Peace Accord. Under this Egypt-Israel Peace Accord, we saw this Sinai Peninsula. It had been occupied by Israel in 1967 war, 6 days war. This Sinai Peninsula was given back to Egypt. So we want peace. We are returning this Sinai Peninsula back to you, but we want now peaceful relations to be established. So the next series of talks, they came in 1993. 1993, 1994, 1995, all these 3 years, the talks were going on. The first set of agreements were reached in 1993. Those agreements are known as Oslo Agreements. In 1979, we had Camp David Accord. In 1993, we had Oslo Accord. Oslo, the capital of Norway. Now again, the talks were mediated by United Nations. Here we can see the US President Bill Clinton. And on the two sides of table were the Israeli Prime Minister Rabin and President of Palestinian Liberation Organization Yasser Arafat. So we had already discussed that PLO, Palestinian Liberation Organization, it had been carrying out militant attacks against Israel since 1964. The declared aim of this organization was to end the state of Israel and proclaim the state of Palestine in this entire Palestinian region. But in 1993, PLO, led by its president Yasser Arafat, it came to a negotiating table with Israel, led by Prime Minister Rabin, mediated by the United States, and both agreed to recognize each other. This recognition was mutual. Again, this was a first. There had been no talks between Israel and Palestinian people or their representatives ever since 1948. No talks, no negotiations. So it was the first time there were negotiations, direct negotiations between the Israeli representative and the representative of the Palestinian people. What were the consequences of these Oslo Accords? It was agreed that a political organization of Palestinian people would be formed. Israel agreed to recognize that political organization of Palestinian people. And that political organization was to be named as Palestinian Authority, Palestine National Authority. Now already, like if this is the map of Israel, this is the West Bank region and this is the Gaza Strip. Now these are the two Palestinian dominated regions. Rest of the region is Jewish dominated region, the state of Israel. Since 1967 war, since 1967 6 days war, Gaza Strip as well as the West Bank, both these territories were militarily occupied by Israel. They had been under military occupation of Israel. In 1993, in the Oslo Accords, first set of agreements in 1993, the second set of agreements in 1995. In these Oslo Accords, Israel agreed to hand over both these territories to Palestinian Authority, Palestinian National Authority, sometimes written as PA or PNA. Officially it is PNA, Palestinian National Authority, but informally it is written as Palestinian Authority, PA. So the control of these two areas, it was to be given back to Palestinian Authority. But it was not that simple. It's not as if this area was altogether handed over to Palestinian Authority. Rather, there were very like minute points, like in every agreement there is this star, terms and conditions apply. So what were the terms and conditions here? This region was divided into three types of territories. You can see three colors here: blue, yellow and orange or brown, whatever. As far as the blue area was concerned, it continued to be under Israeli military occupation. Now this was the region where Israel had established its so-called settlements since 1967 war, and this area of Israeli settlements within West Bank, it continued to be with Israel. End of story. As far as this yellowish area is concerned, now this was rural area where the civil control was handed over to Palestinian Authority, but military control was retained by Israel. So Palestinian Authority, it could have the civic infrastructure, the civilian duties, civilian roles, civilian functions, all those things were taken over by Palestinian Authority. But as far as security functions were concerned, law and order, police, military, So for the security functions, this yellowish area, it continued to be under Israeli control. So civilian control handed over to Palestinian Authority, military control remained with Israel. As far as this brownish area is concerned, now this area, like largely this was the urban area, entire control was handed over to Palestinian Authority, both civil as well as military. That is true for Gaza Strip as well. The entire control of Gaza Strip, shaded in brownish color, it was also handed over to Palestinian Authority. So this was the 1993-1995 Oslo Accords. 1993 Oslo Accords 1, 1995 Oslo Accords 2. So, and this was the arrangement that was agreed at Oslo Accords. Here, the leaders, again, on the Palestinian side, it was Yasser Arafat, the leader of PLO, and on the Egyptian side, it was Prime Minister Rabin. So both these leaders, they mutually agreed to recognize each other. However, Prime Minister Rabin was later assassinated, and in 2004, President Yasser Arafat also died. Now, some extremists on both sides, they were not happy with the arrangement. Some Israeli extremists, they did not want to negotiate with Palestinians, as they had not done since 1948. Some radical extremist Palestinian organizations, they also were not in favor of any negotiations, any deals, any peace agreements with Israel. And prominent among them was Hamas, that we are seeing currently also. The war is basically between the original conflict that started on 23rd October 2023. So that was between Hamas and Israel. So Hamas did not support this agreement between Yasser Arafat and Prime Minister Rabin, and they militarily opposed this agreement. The terrorist attacks continued, the military opposition to this arrangement also continued, and it fed the next series of violent reprisals. Now we'll move to that story later. For now, we'll conclude this video here with the Oslo Accords 1993-1995 that led to creation of Palestinian Authority, and the major contribution of these Oslo Accords was that at least some degree of self-rule was given to Palestinian people for the first time in their history since like 1948 war. So, but that of course did not solve all the problems of Palestinian Arabs and the Jewish people in Israel, and the situation continued to be very fluid, situation continued to be very volatile, and we'll discuss all those aspects in subsequent video. So that was all as far as the history of events between 1948 and 1995 are concerned. I hope you would have enjoyed the video. Thank you from my side.